welcome to the Yellow Jacket Guide podcast. My name is Rihanna, and on this show we talk about all things from travel, wellness, lifestyle, inspiration, so you can live your most fearless travel lifestyle. If you listen to the last few episodes, you know I've been trying to step out of my comfort zone to try and go to more experiences and try new things. And this week I went to the adventure park in Maryland, which is pretty much like a climbing outdoor, like treetop zip lining obstacle course, and it was super fun. I really enjoyed it. I haven't done anything like that before. I've done rock climbing in the past, but this was a more extreme version because rather than someone clipping you in and preparing you and giving the whole like okay, you are doing it yourself. Like, you're clipping yourself in, you're putting yourself on a zip line, you're taking yourself off and moving through the course yourself. So it was very much like you are the safety precaution and also the person doing it. So it was very surreal. And aside from the great time I had at the adventure park, which I definitely recommend you all to try out, I have also been trying out new activities when it comes to traveling. I recently went on a solo trip to Scotland, and I'm going to let you know all of the fun things that I did, things I wish I could have done. And this was also me stepping out of my comfort zone because I haven't traveled to Europe alone. And so I was very interested in like how I was going to get around. I know myself personally, like I can't drive cars in other countries, especially because in Scotland they drive on the opposite side of the street. So I was like, I knew I wasn't going to get a car. So figuring out how to navigate the country while also having a good time and seeing as much as I could, I knew was going to be a challenge, but I was here for it all. So let's get into my Scotland itinerary. I was in Scotland for a little less than a week. I was there for about 6 days. And I wish I would have stayed longer because there's so much to do. But I really knew that I wanted to go to the Highlands, and that was kind of like my spotlight of the trip. I was like, I want to go to the Highlands. I want to be in nature. I want to see like a different, like serene area rather than just being in a city. So a lot of my time was spent in the Highlands. So day one, doing a bit of research, I found that going to Inverness was the closest city to being in the Highlands. That's where Loch Ness is around. And, there's a lot of farms and farmland and cows around there. So I was like, okay, I knew I needed to get to Inverness. But when I was doing the research and the time that I went in June, there were a lot of hotels and like hostels that were already booked up. I guess I went during a very busy time. So I was like, okay, I don't necessarily have to stay in Inverness to get there. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stay in Nairn, which is another town that's maybe like 30 minutes, less than an hour outside of Inverness. And the hotels and everything was like a bit cheaper there. And it was more quiet, which I liked. When I landed in Edinburgh, I went on ScotRail, and ScotRail was literally my bread and butter throughout this whole trip. But I will say, ScotRail takes a while. And if you're not familiar with ScotRail, it's kind of like Amtrak or like a nationwide train. And it basically takes you to a lot of the cities and towns throughout Scotland. And so after I landed in Edinburgh, I had to take a bus to Edinburgh Waverley Station. And then I had to wait for the train to go to Nairn. The train itself was around like 3 to 4 hours. And I had to take 3 different trains. So it just was basically a full day of traveling on the train. It just took forever. So that's something to take into consideration when you're booking the trip and booking the duration, because I did feel that I was spending a lot of time on the trains and I didn't account for that in my travel planning itinerary. Once I got to Nairn, it was a very, very quaint, nice town. It was a lot of older people there and it was very quiet. I'm pretty sure it was like the off season, so it wasn't a lot going on and it was a bit chilly. But It was very nice. It was the perfect like quiet area that I needed, and I was here for the vibes. So I checked into my hotel and I stayed at the West End Hotel in Nairn, and it was pretty nice. It was a very quaint little like hotel. It wasn't like the best hotel that I ever stayed in, but it was pretty nice for how much it cost, and I wasn't too mad about it. So then, of course, I'm starving. I haven't eaten all day. So I went to a restaurant called the Classroom Bistro in Nairn, and it was pretty good. I got like a seafood pasta that was pretty tasty, and the vibes were there. The people were really nice, and I like spoke to the hostess, and they were asking me questions. They were like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm exploring." And she was like, "Oh, make sure you say nice things about me." And I was like, "I will, but I'm definitely going to be honest about it." But it was very nice, and it was very chill. So once I was done with the food and paid for everything, I was like, okay, I'm gonna explore the city a bit. And the thing I noticed about Nairn and a lot of places in Scotland is that things close so early. So by the time I was done with dinner, I'm sure it was around 6 o'clock, and a lot of the stores and businesses were closed. And it was so weird. I was like, why is everything closing so early? So I walked around and not a lot was open, but there was a beach there, and the beach was actually pretty nice. Now, I will say it was chilly considering it was June, but it was very, very nice. Like, it was a very nice, relaxing beach. There weren't a lot of people there, so I just kind of walked along the beach and just sat and relaxed and just take in my environment, because I'm sitting here doing a solo trip in Scotland. Like, it was such a vibe. So I definitely recommend going to Nairn if you're in the Highlands, just to get out of the city and experience a smaller town rather than like the hustle and bustle of even like Inverness. So day 2, I had to get up early because today was an excursion day. So I booked a excursion through TripAdvisor for an Isle of Skye tour. And the Isle of Skye is one of the most popular Highland destinations. You'll see a lot of tourists going there. You'll see a lot of trips going there. And it was a really great excursion to just see the Highlands in one day. And I think that's really what I wanted to do, rather than relying on myself, because a lot of places you needed to go to, you needed to have a car. And I was like, I don't want to commit to that. I'm only here for so long. So I was like, let me buy an excursion so I can see all of them in one sitting. So the tour started at 8 a.m. and I got there. They had a few different buses. Give them your name and you're on your way. So we stopped at Yurgot Castle, and we also stopped at Elil Donan Castle. And it was really nice. I love architecture, so seeing the castles was definitely something on my bucket list. We also got to see some Highland cows. We stopped at a little farm. We didn't get to touch them, unfortunately, but it was very fun just to see them out and about. And we also stopped at the Isle of Mull, which is also a very big tourist destination for the Highlands. It's a little like fishing town, and they have different colorful buildings, and it was just really touristy, honestly. So we stopped there for lunch, and I went to Cafe Ariba and got a veggie burger, which was pretty good, surprisingly. Not all veggie burgers are good, but that was a nice little stop while we were on our trip. And then we did a few other stops along the way to different cliffs and different lookout points. So it was really nice just to see the scenery, get to see the ocean, get to see the loch, and, really explore Scotland from a different perspective. And also the driver gives history about, the area. But to be honest, I was asleep for a lot of that because I had crazy jet lag. So I got off at the stops and then slept during the ride. So that whole excursion lasted until 8 p.m. So I left, got some food, and then got some gelato, and then I went back to my hotel, and it was pretty smooth sailing. So day 3 was a hiking day. I love to hike, I love to walk, and you can't go to Scotland without seeing Loch Ness. Like, I am very into like the fun conspiracy theories, and do I believe that the Loch Ness monster is real? Yes. Yes, I do. I wanted to go to a place where I can touch the water and really like get immersed and actually see it and take it all in. So I found a trail called the Loch Ness Trail. So from Nairn, I had to get on a train to Inverness. They also have a bus, and then you have to catch another bus to get to the start of the trail. I also didn't want to do like a lot of Ubers. I like to take the public transportations in different cities that I go to. So I'm walking the trail, and it's a wooded trail, it's a wooded area. So I'm like, okay, everything's fine. There wasn't a lot of people out there. And then I get to like a fork in the road, and it stops from being a wooded trail to a paved road. And like they have the different signs, but it wasn't clear which way to go. And so I ended up going a completely different direction from, I guess, the intended trail. So rather than following the Loch Ness Trail path, I went to Google Maps and I was like, okay, how do I get to Loch Ness? Like, how do I see the water? So I looked on Google Maps, and the closest place that I could find to actually get to Loch Ness, because I didn't trust the direction that the trail was taking me, was Doris Beach. And that was a place that you can actually sit on a beach. You can, relax. You can touch the water. You can put your feet in the water from the pictures that I saw. They also had a restaurant attached to it. So I was like, okay, this seems like a place that I can go to. The only thing is that it took 2 hours to walk there. So it was going to be a journey. But I was prepared. I was already prepared to walk. So I already had all of my stuff. The only problem is that I didn't bring enough water. I didn't bring enough snacks and food. I did have like a bagel beforehand, and I wish I would have prepared with more snacks. But all of that to say, I had a good time. It was very nice. I was literally like in the backs of people's farms. Like I was on this trail. I did a lot of reflecting on that walk, and it wasn't completely isolated. Like there were some areas where I was just like, whoa, like I am alone in the backwoods of Scotland. Like this is so like wild. But then there was other times where I was just like, wow, like I'm in the backwoods of Scotland, like seeing the wind, seeing the grass, seeing the animals, and seeing like different farms and stuff. So it was very, very cool. But I didn't have the best shoes, but that's beside the point. And so when I got to the beach, there were a lot of people that were there. There were a lot of tourists out there. So I also wasn't isolated on the beach, which was pretty nice. Surprisingly, the beach wasn't like a sand beach. It was rocks. It was smooth rocks on the beach, and I never experienced that before. So that was also pretty interesting. Unfortunately, the restaurant was closed when I got there, but it was fine regardless. So I stayed at the beach for about an hour or two, and then I headed on the bus back to Inverness and then back to Nairn, and that was my last day in the Highlands. So day 4, I'm leaving Nairn, going through Inverness, and our next stop is Glasgow. Now, I saw a lot of fun things to do in Glasgow when I was doing my research. Like it just looked a little more like rustic than Edinburgh. But to be fair, when I got to Glasgow, it was more city, and it just felt like kind of like a college town. And there weren't many excursions to do that I saw. So I checked into the hotel. I stayed at the AC Marriott, and the hotel was super nice. From someone who was used to staying in hostels, this was a nice, relaxing change of pace. So I really enjoyed that. And clearly my body needed it, because the first day I stayed in the hotel like half the day. Usually I'm up at the crack of dawn going on excursions, but that day in Glasgow was really chill. Like it was very chill vibes. Like I walked around. I saw a TARDIS for any of my Doctor Who stands, so that was pretty cool. And so I just walked around the city, and I was like, the people are a little bit more rugged than Inverness and in Nairn, but it just felt like city people. You know, when you go to different cities, I feel like more people are going about their lives and that kind of thing. So Glasgow was pretty chill. I stayed in Glasgow for 2 days. Nothing too bad to say about it. I did go to the art gallery, which was pretty cool. And I also found a place that sells halal smash burgers, and it was actually pretty good. And I got crepes, which were also very tasty. So Glasgow was kind of just like a relaxation area. I also went and got a massage that I desperately needed. I think I needed to go to a different massage place or just get a different style of massage. I got a Swedish massage, but I definitely think I needed to get like a deep tissue or something, because she was going like super gentle, and she didn't massage my feet for some reason. So I'm still mad about that. So after my 2 days in Glasgow, the next stop was Edinburgh, and I went from Glasgow to Edinburgh, but I think I got on the wrong train. I think there is like a direct train from Glasgow to Edinburgh, but I think I went on like the longer route, which took like maybe like an hour and a half, but I think there is a shorter train that maybe takes like 30 minutes. So I did waste a good amount of time like on that train ride, unfortunately. And then when I got to Edinburgh, it was around like 3, 4 o'clock. I still needed to check into my hotel, which I stayed in the University of Edinburgh, which they have like a summer's hostel program. And the campus was really nice. I got to stay there. I got to experience it. They also had free breakfast, which was amazing. For university food, I was very surprised. So after I checked into my hotel, put my bags down, I decided to go back into Edinburgh just to see, because I only kind of had a half a day in Edinburgh. So of course, I did a Harry Potter walking tour. This was a free Harry Potter walking tour where they took us around Edinburgh. They took us around the cemeteries, really, and got to see different inspirations for Harry Potter there. So that was pretty cool. But I wish I would have got there a little earlier so I can go to the different museums, because I am a museum nerd. So I didn't get to go to any of the museums, but there were still a few shops that were open. And then I went into this restaurant where they served like a vegetarian haggis, which I really wanted to try like authentic haggis so bad, but the shop that I wanted to go to wasn't open anymore. But I had this vegetarian haggis and it wasn't too bad. It was just like, it was very filling. So if the authentic version is the same way, I'm like, okay, I get why you guys like this. It's like, it's a very filling meal. So after I got my haggis, I walked along Edinburgh streets. I walked in the park. I was looking at cathedrals, and the architecture in Edinburgh is super, super nice. Like, I really enjoyed it. And I wish I would have stayed in Edinburgh a bit longer. I think if I ever do go back to Scotland, I will do a chunk of time in Edinburgh specifically, and maybe do a few day trips leaving out of Edinburgh so I can really experience just how much culture there is in that city. And yeah, so after I was walking around, I got some gelato again and went back to the hotel. And then the next day was my flight. I had an early flight, which I wish I would have got a later flight so I could just, really enjoy Edinburgh a bit more. And that was my time in Scotland. Overall, my ranking for Scotland would be a smooth 8.5 out of 10. I would definitely go back to Scotland. Like I said, I would want to stay in Edinburgh a bit longer. I think I would skip Glasgow. Maybe if I do decide to go to Glasgow, stay in Edinburgh and then just do like a day trip to Glasgow. And then the Highlands were immaculate. I really enjoyed it. I would definitely spend a lot more time in the Highlands, maybe go into other little cities. And yeah, that is my week-long Scotland itinerary. Let me know if you would ever go to Scotland, if that is on your bucket list. And I would leave you with that for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, go follow me on Instagram at The Yellow Jacket Guide and listen to the audio version of this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, the lot of them. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye.